What do
What's
you
that going
think
to do to
about
commodity prices? Well, what do you think this is going to do to commodity prices? I believe that we're on the cusp of another commodity super cycle because everything's coming together and ahead here, right?
Welcome back to Metals and Miners. I'm its founder and its host, Gary Bohm. Today we have a fantastic discussion lined up, and we're fortunate to have with us Tom Luongo. Tom is a former research chemist, dairy goat farmer, Anarcho-Libertarian, and Austrian economist whose work can be found on sites like Zerohedge, Bitcoin Magazine, Newsmax Media, and so many others. He's the founder of the blog Gold, Goats, and Guns. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today.
Appreciate it, Gary. Good to meet you. How are you?
Great. All right. So multiple U.S. politicians are on record as to speaking about destabilizing Russia in order to force Putin out of power so that Western corporations can come into Russia and raid their commodity-rich land. Do you see what's happening geopolitically through this lens? And if so, do you believe that they're going to be successful? And what are the ramifications of these efforts here?
That's a three-part question, so I'll try and make sure that the answer is not a half an hour long. Yes, and no. I guess it's probably the short answer. Yes, that's what they're trying to do, among other things. Yes, I see the world that way. And do I think they're going to be successful? Not if Vladimir Putin has anything to say about it. Who clearly understands what the nature of the game is. Putin is enough of a student of history, and he has a weird Russian version of history, and that's fine. But he has enough of a historical understanding to know exactly where this comes from, this whole push and drive to destroy Russia, who's ultimately really behind it, whether and how to beat them, because he's already proven multiple times how to beat the color revolution process, right? The color revolution process perfected by the British, going back probably 200 years now. The more I think about the way history is laid out, the more I just see this as a I guess a good framework by which to talk about things. We talk about them as color revolutions today, but really the U.S. quote unquote civil war between the states was an attempt at color revolution. The many ways the Bolshevik Revolution was won, blah, blah, blah. We can go back, right? So because Putin understands this, he knows how to beat them. He knows what their weaknesses are. And their weakness is that their system, their financial system, their system of mercantilism through currency arbitrage and collateral procurement is failing. He knows he is preserving that part of the system, that part of the global economy for his own, to his own purposes. So he knows how to beat them, which is eventually you just attrit them out. You force them into a war they can't win. And then you force the costs on their partners so high that eventually the cartel that they bring together to form this coalition of the willing to go in and oust the evil Putin, like they tried with Assad, which Putin's helped stop. Eventually it doesn't work. And eventually the thing just peters out. We're a decade since, now almost a decade since Putin intervened in Syria, and notice what's happening in Syria, right? Saudis are inviting them back into the Arab League. The Syria is opening up the diplomatic relations again with most of their neighbors. The U.S. forces that are left there, stealing all the oil and sending it to Israel, are coming under repeated now drone fire and attack. So what was a metastable environment for a long time is now starting to fall apart, but originally it was Putin moving in, supporting the Syrian Arab army and pushing the U.S. and foreign proxies off of most of the country, leaving the area east of the Euphrates River and the province of Idlib to the invaders. And that's where we are. And now that's starting to break down. Same thing with the war in Ukraine. Like Ukraine is a conflict 30 years in the making, 40 years in the making. Nothing to certainly going back to like maybe the fall of the Soviet Union. So let's call it 30 years. And they were expecting to be able to walk in, build an army, and then go first, roll the Donbass, the resistance in the Donbass. And it didn't work because Putin went first and put everybody on their back foot. And now he's just running. Now it's just a war of attrition. So yes.
Yeah. So, Tom, clearly this war between the Western powers and Russia, it's escalating. It's not toning down. The most recent evidence being U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He went over there and he said it was okay for Ukraine to use American-made long-range missiles to hit deep inside Russia. Poland then came out and they said publicly that Blinken needs to leave the area immediately. They don't want war. They clearly feel like they're in danger. Russia's putting their military reserves on standby. They're boosting their potential army to 2.4 million soldiers. And yesterday they ran simulating bombing attacks using nuclear aircraft. Who knows how all of this is going to end, but it doesn't look good. But, you know, I think what we're really interested in right now, though, is what kind of impact is the ongoing and increasing war and war rhetoric going to have on commodities availability, commodities pricing, et cetera, the longer this thing goes on?
Well, let's start with let's go back to some of the other things. Let's remind ourselves that when a Polish MP says, hey, you shouldn't do this, that's nice, but he has no power. Donald Tusk is setting power. Radek Sikorski, the former foreign minister in Poland, who's a British asset, he has more influence over Polish policy than the MP that spoke out. Bully for the MP that spoke out. Like, no argument, right? But let's not kid ourselves here. That guy has about as much power as, Tulsi Gabbard has here in the United States, right? So, and I love Tulsi, and she's great, and she's got a lot of influence, but she doesn't have any power. Fundamentally different. So, this war rhetoric is not going to end. And I also want to push back on Blinken. Blinken went over there and said that. He went over there with UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy. Everybody who just wants to let's talk about Blinken. Everybody forgets that it's the Brits that are pushing everybody forward into the meat grinder, as they've done for the last 250 freaking years. And it's, Lammy said, signs an agreement with Ukraine that that the UK is going to support them for the next 100 years. I'm like, the UK is not going to exist in 100 years at this point. Okay. Neither is the European Union. It's like, so these people are writing checks that they can't, with their mouths that they can't cash. And they're all clearly bloviating at a certain level because they all are saying these things because they really fundamentally believe that the Americans are going to come in and fight their war for them. But the Americans don't have a fighting force to actually, I don't know, how are you going to subjugate Russia with 200,000 troops? Like, seriously. Like, if we even have that many, honest to God, ready combat troops, 200,000. Putin just came out this morning and signed a decree forgiving all the debt and all the obligations of every soldier who's fought in the special military operation to date and who will fight. And, he's just like, we've got the money. We're writing a check to our military. Like, so
what do you
what's that going to do to commodity
the
prices? Well, what do you think this is going to do to commodity prices? I believe that we're on the cusp of another commodity super cycle, because everything's coming together and ahead here, right? You have, if Ukraine fails, which it's going to fail, you're not going to move Putin off of Ukraine. Okay. And no matter how many provocations we throw their way, he's not going to give them their war on their terms, which is to say, Putin is the second incarnation of Hitler, and we all need to, gin up for the good Christian just war to go kick his ass out of the Kremlin and finally finish the job, and blah 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 blah. None of that's real. Like, all the people in the United States that are even remotely interested in espousing that point are people who are, one, unfit for combat, two, are literally crazy and are going to shove their children into Ukraine. I see these memes all the time of like, Mom, I really don't want to go fight over in Ukraine. Shut up, honey. I need to. I can't even remember the actual meme, but it's like I need to prove that Donald Trump works for Hitler or works for Putin. Like, really? Shut up. Okay, so like that's kind of where we are, and that's not going to happen. The European people aren't going to fight for this. The Russians have no capability of. On the one hand, you'll have somebody like John Bolton come out and say, "Well, Putin does not have the military capacity to invade Europe." Right? They don't. We've been saying that from the beginning. They're not going to ever invade Europe. But that's his way of saying they're weak and we can take them. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. No, you can't. Well, if we bomb them with everything, we could. Okay. And then they bomb us with everything, and then 5 billion people are dead, and you're king of the ant pile. And you're all dead, by the way. Because if you think that Putin doesn't have doesn't have written in Russian Sharpie on the side of various Kinzals Klaus Schwab's name and George Soros's name and the King of England's name and Ursula von der Leyen's name, and doesn't know exactly where they are and can really, y'all are going to die. So what does this do to commodities? Look, if they lose in Ukraine, the sovereign debt crisis that is incipient because of that will cause one of two things. Either massive deflation as all the credit-based assets collapse in price, or the expected result from that, which is that they will print to high heaven in order to inflate away the debt, the obligations. Now, the big question is, who is going to do that? Everybody is assuming that it's going to be the United States along with the rest of the G7. I just don't happen to believe it's the United States along with the rest of the G7. I think the rest of the G7 are all going to go broke, and Jerome Powell's going to sit at the Federal Reserve and go, that's nice. Interest rates are still 5.25%. I think he's going to cut by 25% on Wednesday. So you and I are doing this on Monday before the Federal Reserve meeting. When England has to do that, when the ECB has to do that, that's when everything gets really interesting, right? That's when that's when things get interesting. And they're going to be desperately trying to procure collateral for their economy and for their bond markets, energy for their economies, at a time when they don't have all they can do is print money. And then what happens? And so we're starting to see that. Like, they've beaten oil with the ugly stick in every way imaginable.
Right.
I don't believe a word of it. I understand that it's an election cycle in America. The party in power couldn't get the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates. So what did they do? They bombed the price of oil, and they vol washed all the small specks out of the market, and have completely collapsed all rationality in the oil markets. Oil's trading at $71, $72 a barrel, Brent, and should be trading at 90 or 95. We're like near break-even prices across the entire Permian and the Bakken. Like, these guys can't make any money at $67 a barrel WTI. Like, they can't make any money. So either the wells are going to shut down, or they're going to pump more and drive prices even lower while continuing to flare off natural gas at $225 a million BTUs. No. Copper has hit a floor and is starting to bounce off of it. Other industrial metals are doing the exact same thing. Gold is clearly in a bull phase, and now silver is trying desperately to join its big brother. Nothing is going to change though until after the election. The point is that this is about coronating Queen Kamala Harris, and then they'll let the markets go. That's what's going to happen.
So let's go back to the rates here for a moment. Fed Chair Powell, he's vowing to cut rates with stocks, home prices, rents, and food at all-time highs. It's really never been tried before like this. In your analysis, what do you see the outcome of this being?
Well, as Daniel DiMartino Booth, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for, keeps pointing out to everybody, that Stock markets always rise with rising interest rates, and then when the Fed starts to cut, that's when the stock market starts to fall. And usually with a 6 to 8 week lag time. The reason being is that the Fed, everybody like looks at thinks like a Keynesian. You stop thinking like a Keynesian, start thinking like an Austrian. And I mean this sincerely. And this is to Danielle's credit that she's not doctrinaire about any economic school of economic thought. And on this, the Keynesians will tell you, and even the Keynesians to a lesser extent, but we've never really been Keynesians anyway. So we'll even tell you, look, the Fed is supposed to cut interest rates to stimulate the economy, but they're supposed to also fight inflation. Their mandate is stable prices and full employment. Those two things are, of course, at odds with each other. They're almost mutually exclusive. Stable prices, full employment. You can't have the Fed's dual mandate is literally bad code. Okay, so they're going to do this because we've already had a massive inflationary wave, but inflation is starting to roll over and credit asset prices are starting to fall over. But the Fed will cut interest rates, and I don't think they're going to cut very deeply here. The market is clearly asking for 75. Well, Elizabeth Warren was out this morning with a letter, 75 basis points. The Fed hasn't cut 75 basis points at a meeting unless there was unless the world was ending. And last I checked, the U.S. 10-year is trading at 363 this morning. Really? The world's not ending right now. So that seems dumb. But that's clearly why she's saying that and why she's doing that and why they're talking about it in these terms is because it's the offshore dollar markets that are screaming. They're the ones that don't have any dollars. They're the ones that are vulnerable to the Fed continuing to keep interest rates high. We don't see any banking stress here in the United States yet. Is there going to be banking stress over the commercial real estate issues and car loan delinquencies and credit card delinquencies and everything else? Of course there is. And maybe the Fed cuts by 25 basis points to take some of the pressure, to lift some of the pressure on that scenario.
If they don't cut 50, which I think now the odds are favoring 50 even over 25. The last I saw it was like 60-40 or 58-42 or something like that.
Hell, the Fed Funds Futures tool is telling you 70% a 50-point cut and a 30% 75-point cut.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It is. But that's what I'm saying. So if they actually do only cut 25, is the market going to have a hissy fit?
What market?
Okay, fine.
Which market are we talking about?
Equities.
Because it's not equities.
Yeah.
Equities are going to go, the Dow's going to go to 43,000. The bond markets are going to sell off. What's in a real bull market? Bonds. We've had a 110 basis point move in the U.S. 10-year since Janet Yellen started doing treasury-based yield curve control. Quantitative easing.
So Tom, Ken Griffin of Citadel Advisors, he recently sold over 9 million shares of NVIDIA. The NVIDIA founder, Huang, he recently just sold $36 million of his stock, and that's like the fifth time he sold in the last 5 months. The Berkshire Hathaway main insurance guy, Ajit Jain, he literally sold his entire Berkshire share stake, and Buffett has been selling Apple, Bank of America. And what is all of this major selling in the equity markets telling us? Well,
NVIDIA is a bubble based on the yen carry trade, and so is and while I love Bitcoin, I hate to disappoint the Maxis in the audience, but Bitcoin is highly correlated to the Nasdaq, which is highly correlated to the yen carry trade. The yen carry trade is unwinding. This morning, we're looking at the yen wanting to break down below 140 versus the dollar. That's fine. NVIDIA is rolling over because NVIDIA is a bubble. And with the Bank of Japan tightening and acting kind of like the Fed's wingman in this respect, we can see a rollout of tech stocks because the Nasdaq has outperformed the Dow. When I said earlier the Dow was going to 43,000, I was very specific. I didn't say the S&P 500. I didn't say the Nasdaq. I didn't say the Russell 2000. I didn't say U.S. equities. I said the Dow Jones, because the Dow Jones is the proxy. And again, I stand on the shoulders of giants for international capital. So Martin Armstrong has made these delineation between each of these markets for years. You know, look, the NASDAQ is your growth fund. The S&P is the broad domestic economy.
So do you see those two funds going down?
What's
you
that?
See,
I
you
can
see the
see
NASDAQ and the S&P dropping?
I absolutely see in Q3, the data is stark. The Dow is the best performing index of all the major indices. The NASDAQ is off. The DAX is The DAX is up because as the safe haven trade of Europe, the Eurostoxx 50, which is where all the EU banking stocks are, down. The Nikkei down.
So how far of a drop are you anticipating for the S&P?
I don't know. I don't truck in that stuff. What I say is the following. What matters now is not whether stocks go up or down. What matters is who holds up best, who outperforms on a relative basis everything else. I can see if we have a liquidity crisis, everything goes down. Gold goes down, silver goes down, metals go down, stocks go down, bonds get sold, everything gets sold, everybody goes to cash.
Yeah.
It's a liquidity crisis. What matters is who falls the least and who recovers the fastest. That's what matters. So I've been telling everybody for months, like, dude, can't predict what's going to happen next. This is like unprecedented levels of uncertainty. So maybe you should not be fully invested. Maybe you should have 20% on the sidelines in cash. Maybe that's all Buffett is doing. He was way overweight in Apple. Apple was half of his portfolio. Okay.
That's a fair point.
And he was way overweight in Apple, and he's probably staring at railroad stocks and pipeline stocks and salivating. I refuse to say that Warren Buffett has gotten so old that he starts drooling, unlike Joe Biden or Charlie Munger or some of the other people.
Well, so let's discuss the yield curve then. Historically, it's not the lead up to or the day of the uninversion that signals a recession, but rather the bear steepening afterwards. When and if it happens, now that the yield curve has uninverted, do you expect a rapid bear steepening like in times past? Do you expect a U.S. recession?
Well, let's start with the beginning. Remember, it's the 210 spread that has uninverted. The rest of the curve is deeply inverted because everybody's expecting Powell. They have front-run expectations put forth by those that have been out there doing yield curve control on the U.S. markets to control their own markets, meaning the Bank of England, the ECB, and the U.S. Treasury have been working against the Federal Reserve. They've been working against the Federal Reserve to keep the yield curve inverted. And the rest of the world, like bond traders are not stupid. There are smart bond traders. There are momentum chasers. There are all sorts of people within the market. Right. So the Momo monkeys, the momentum chasers. I love that phrase. It's from Zerohedge. I use it whenever I can. And people are like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, Momo monkeys. They're the guys chasing momentum. They don't give a shit what the market's about. All they care about is making money in the next trade that they're going to make tomorrow. They're going to cash out of the thing. Okay, they're just riding momentum. They've been clearly front running the long end of the yield curve since Yellen came out and said she's going to start buying 10s, 20s, and 30s. What a shock. Just like the world has been, buying German 10 years when they reached 2.5% because Lagarde has said she's going to maintain yield curve control, and she's been doing it for maintain credit spreads within the European market. Well, she didn't say within the European market. She said she would maintain credit spreads. What she's been doing is been managing the U.S.-German 10-year spread, and if she can manage that, she can manage everything else. Because then French debt, Italian debt, Spanish debt, Portuguese debt all takes its cue off of German debt. So if you can control the U.S. 10-year, you can control the German Bund. If you can control German Bund, you're going to control Italian BTPs and all the rest of it. So, but the wild card is the Bank of Japan, because the Bank of Japan has decided to stop playing poker with its whole cards face up for everybody to see. Like they stopped playing poker badly, like a 4-year-old. They're now actually playing the game. Like they actually look at their whole cards and don't show them to the camera. Like, you know what I mean? And then oh, by the way, I have 8-7. Yeah, I bet. Like, okay, whatever. Like, so, I got a pair of jacks this time. Oh, I guess I'm folding. Oh, whatever. You know what I mean? So, like, because of that, you can expect the Japanese, out of necessity, to start defending themselves, which they absolutely have done. But that's going to create, with Japan getting off the zero bound and with them engaging and allowing the long end of their yield curve to rise, what they're doing is they're incentivizing for their own corporates and their own investors, Japanese international investors, to repatriate funds, strengthen the yen, offer a halfway decent nominal yield, blah blah, beginnings of a nominal yield. And remember, the Bank of Japan has both equities and bonds on their balance sheet, so they can buy and sell whatever they want to maintain to handle this process. But what they're doing is they're unwinding, and they're forcing the unwinding of the infinite leverage trade-off of them being at the zero bound. Now that you've done that, and that's all they really had to do. Well, it's only 15 basis points. Like, yeah, but it's not zero anymore. These were one-way trades, and the markets always price out all the arbitrage. It's not like guys were out there, running carry trades off the Japanese yen and not splitting those things down to the nearest freaking basis point. Of course they were. That's what markets do. So markets get used to a specific pricing structure. They hit that structure. They stay in that, and they're in that regime. And then when the structure changes, now they got to liquidate. Now they got to move, right? And it doesn't matter how small the thing is. It's why when I go back to why the 5 basis points that changed the world when Powell raised the Fed fund, the reverse repo payout rate 5 basis points above the Fed funds rate in June of 2021, it destroyed the euro. It started draining M0 from the global dollar trade, and it to the tune of trillions of dollars, which meant tens of trillions of dollars of credit and leverage out of the system in a matter of months. Okay? $2 trillion went onto the reverse repo balance sheet. That money came from the offshore dollar markets. And that's what ultimately started to liquefy SOFR and all the other things that I've talked about to 1,000 times. Now, what's important to get lost in all the details on this is that not to get lost in all the details is the following. If Powell disappoints markets, they are expecting a 50 or 75 point cut. They're really expecting 50. If he only gives them 25, and who's been the biggest buyer of U.S. Treasuries? The Bank of England and its subsidiaries, the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, the Caymans, yada, yada, yada. And the ECB, along with Belgium, Ireland, Euroclear, blah, 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 to the tune of something like $1 trillion over the last 3 years, or the U.S. Treasuries. Like, the Bank of England owns more U.S. Treasuries now than China does. Okay? So, but the UK is staring at a massive problem. What they need is to sell. They bought all those things while Powell was raising rates, and they bought a lot of them at 5, when the 10-year was trading at 4.75, right? At 5, at 4.5. They want to sell them now at 3.6, 3.5. And do what? Book the profit. But they're big players. They can't sell $500 billion worth of U.S. Treasuries on the market and not move the price. So they need a policy statement from the Fed that they're going to aggressively cut, which then the market will interpret that way and trade that way. And then they can sell into that as the bear steepener unfolds, but it can unfold in such a way that they can do it and not move price.
Let me ask you this question.
Now, if Powell only cuts 25 basis. This is really important, Gary.
Okay, go ahead.
Powell only cuts 25 basis points. The bear steepener is going to come back hard. They're going to be trapped at the top, and they're going to have to double down and buy even more while the prices are falling in order to keep their balance sheets from exploding. Especially in Europe, where all debt is bank debt, not corporate debt, like it is here in the United States. You got to remember, there's a fundamental difference in the structure between European capital markets and American capital markets. Here, we issue corporate debt. Apple's out there issuing corporate paper at a point and a half, right? 75 basis points. In Italy, they go to the bank and you buy a loan from Intesa Sanpaolo or Unicredit or whatever. You don't Stellantis doesn't issue corporate paper in the same volume that we do. And so for that reason, you have to understand that if interest rate differentials get out of whack, if the spreads collapse, the banks are all going to blow up. And then even worse, the central banks could blow up.
That's an amazing point. I hadn't heard this context before. Let me ask you this question. So back in 2008, during the great financial crisis, China basically came and bailed out the world, but this time around, they're having massive problems of their own. There's no way that they're going to be able to bail out the world. If there's nobody available to bail out the world, what happens if there's a global recession? That's really bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's. Yes, if there's a global recession, it's going to be bad. Rates are going to rise. Equities are going to trade or are going to likely trade sideways in a rotation trade. But again, the bond markets dwarf the size of the equity markets by orders of magnitude. Okay? Like, I wouldn't want to be the mayor of a city that's issued a lot of muni debt at this point, right? I wouldn't want to be that guy. I wouldn't want to be the guy. I wouldn't want to be Eric Adams over in New York City. I wouldn't want to be the mayor of Los Angeles. I wouldn't want to be the mayor of Seattle or Chicago or anything like, right? I would, on the other hand, be okay with being the mayor of Miami. Plenty of money in Florida. More money's flowing in every day. I live in Florida. I can tell you this. Even, no matter what you hear about, inventories in Florida are rising and blah, blah, it's all in South Florida where the prices are too high. Come to where I live in North Florida, and there is no inventory. There's no inventory, right? They're building houses in my area like it's going like it's, I don't know, like it's the baby boom. And I'm dead serious when I say this. Like 3-2s, Lennar's out there, plotting out 160 acres in the middle of nowhere, what you would consider the middle of nowhere. And a field that I drive by every day, and I'm like, I saw the sign, I'm like, oh, that's going to get turned into housing? I thought that thing was zoned commercial. It's not. It used to be zoned it used to be a hayfield. It's not going to be a hayfield anymore. It's going to be 160 or 100 or 200 acres worth of tract housing, okay? And they're going to go with 280 to 400,000 bucks.
So Tom, I'm gonna shift us over to gold here for a second. Algeria, Austria, Belgium, Cameroon, Czech Republic, Egypt, France, Germany, Ghana, Hungary, India, Nigeria, Netherlands. You get the point. I'll go on and on and on. Every one of these countries have something in common. They've all repatriated their gold from the U.S. and the U.K. in the last couple of years. What are these actions telling us?
It tells you that the BRICS are serious about issuing the unit to do trade settlement, and that everybody needs gold reserves in order to collateralize their trade deficits and their trade surpluses. So that's what it tells you.
So as far as the de-dollarization, what the BRICS are doing, what trends are you watching out for? How serious is the de-dollarization effort that they're undertaking as far as an impact on the dollar and inflation?
Well, in the short term, none. Zero. Because it's not a short-term process. Any more than Bitcoin taking over the financial space is a short-term process, right? Not that I necessarily believe that, but that's the argument. If you believe in the Bitcoin standard, for example, I'm just using this as an example. This is the first thing that pops into my head. Like, if you believe that Bitcoin is going to, or something like Bitcoin is going to take and going to have go to the way of the dodo, the current uncollateralized system that we currently have, the debt-based system we have, which I bet on, but I just wouldn't bet on it happening while I'm alive. I'm 56 years old. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 10 years. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 30 years. The same way that de-dollarization, because I also happen to agree with my friend Brent Johnson on this, that de-dollarization is happening, but it's happening at a pace that is going to be commensurate with the inertia within the market. And there's a lot of inertia within these markets. There's a lot of bond funds and family office covenants, and like there's all this legal impediment to people getting quote unquote off the dollar. The dollar still settles an awful lot of trade. It settles more trade now than it did 5 years ago, Why? Because Europe cut off its nose to spite its face, and the euro has collapsed as an international trade settlement currency. And the pound is rapidly going to be replaced by the UAE dirham as a foreign as a forex settling currency. Remember, the British pound's only claim to fame at this point is that it settles something like 30% of all foreign exchange, right? Transactions. And part of the reason for that, City of London owns a lot of the international insurance industry for things like shipping and, all and that stuff. And so because of that, that's where their power still lies. But the gold being repatriated, that's everybody, like mercantilism is coming back. We're breaking up into economic blocks. But it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen next year. We're not going to wake up one morning and find ourselves in a new mercantilist system. But we are going to wake up one day and realize that, oh my God, the United States is a two-tiered monetary system just like China does. We just didn't announce it to the world. We still have an open capital account in name, but not in deed. And that's what's coming. And it'll be in relation to gold, and you'll understand it by how physical gold, flows in and out of various countries. Right now, everybody is thinking in terms of how do we keep gold from flowing out of our country unless we need it, unless we can convert that gold into things we need, like oil or titanium or lead or whatever it is that we need that we don't produce, coffee, food, whatever.
This is a really good segue for this next question, Tom. Last week, Russia, they announced a 700% increase in gold purchases. This is 1 month before the coming BRICS summit. It's also 1 week before the Western powers started talking about it being acceptable that U.S. manufactured long-range missiles were allowed to be used to strike inside of Russia. But are all these actions, coincidence? Are they coordinated? What is Russia's announcement about this gold increase purchasing? What is it really telling the world? What's really happening here? I want to point everyone over to our Substack. It is free. Go to metalsandminers.substack.com. We post free content on the consumer, economy, markets, artificial intelligence, individual metals and miners, and all the expert interviews just like this one that we conduct. They're all up there. And when you subscribe, we want to give you a free gift. It's a report that we wrote. It's based on the important Ray Dalio foundational premise. It's titled, "If You Don't Own Gold, You Know Neither History Nor Economics." This free gift is a must read on why everyone should own gold. So head over to metalsandminers.substack.com, put in your email address to subscribe and receive the free gift on us. Also, I'm positive that you've enjoyed the conversation with Tom as much as I have. Please let him know. Hit the like and subscribe button and leave a comment below the video.